Everything is in readiness, master. We merely await your word.
Spook!
So for part 2 of my mini-series on the Scottish play, I'll go back to prosaic speech. Part 1 was about why a lot of actors never say the name Macbeth. But for part 2, I want to talk about one of the most mysterious characters in the entire Shakespeare canon, and that is the Scotsman's armorer, whose name is this. Now when you see this name, what does it look like? My instinct when I first read this name was that it was Seyton, but there's a lot of disagreement even among Shakespeare scholars whether this is supposed to be Seyton or Seaton. Ian McKellen says Seyton.
Seyton.
Paul Schofield says Seaton.
Seaton.
Orson Welles says Seyton.
Seyton!
John Finch says Seaton.
Seaton!
Patrick Stewart says Seyton.
Seyton!
At the actual Globe Theatre in London, they say Seaton.
Seyton!
And Michael Fassbender says Seyton.
Seyton.
And so because so many people pronounce it Seyton, there is a fan theory that the character literally represents the devil. Because again, this character is quite mysterious. He's the only one of the Scotsman's servants to have a name. In the script, all the other servant characters are just called things like servant, messenger, doctor, porter, gentlewoman, first murderer, second murderer. But no, this guy has a name, and he doesn't show up until Act 5 before the final battle, where he serves as the Scotsman's armorer. But something's a little strange about this character. Let's watch his first scene. What is your gracious pleasure?
What news more?
All is confirmed, my lord, which was reported.
I'll fight till from my bones my flesh be hacked. Give me my armor.
'Tis not needed yet.
I'll put it on.
Those are all his lines in his first scene. Why does he say that Macker's armor is not needed yet? Is it because he's the devil and he knows exactly when Mackers is going to die? The character has one more scene a bit later. The Scotsman is alone with him right before the final battle, and they hear the ladies-in-waiting who attend on Lady M cry out in anguish. The Scotsman hears this and he asks,
What is that noise?
"It is the cry of women, my good lord."
I've almost forgot the taste of fears.
And the character exits to investigate the source of the cry, and then a moment later comes back and says, "The queen, my lord, is dead."
She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word.
And then Mackers proceeds to give the famous nihilistic tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow speech. Earlier in the play, Lady M has a monologue where she invokes evil spirits to come and strengthen her evil resolve, and so the theory goes that a kind of Faustian bargain has taken place, and so Seyton is the one who delivers the news to Mackers that Lady M is dead, because he's come to personally take her soul to hell himself. She's desperately trying to wash her hands of the guilt of what she's done, crying, "Out damned spot," and so Seyton is like, "Oh, you're getting cold feet now? Alright, well, you're not holding up your end of the bargain. It's time for you to come with me." After all, the Scottish play was probably written in the year 1606, and I will talk more about that date later in part 3. But that's chronologically after when Christopher Marlowe, another famous Elizabethan playwright, would have written Dr. Faustus, which is a seminal play about a man who sells his soul to the devil in exchange for knowledge and pleasure, but then gets dragged off stage to hell at the end of the story. And the works of Christopher Marlowe were a big influence on Shakespeare, and so the theory goes that Lady M has her own kind of Faustian arc in the Scottish play, culminating with the appearance of Seyton. And the final thing that people cite as evidence for this Seyton theory is that before the character makes his entrance, Mackers says his name 3 times. So it's like a Beetlejuice thing. Mackers calls for Seyton twice, and Seyton doesn't appear, so Mackers has a brief soliloquy, and then he calls for Seyton a 3rd time, and that's when he appears. This theory is pretty fun, especially for the actor who's playing the character. However, I think the theory's wrong. This name is an old alternate spelling of Seaton, which is a Scottish clan. Members of the Seaton clan have historically been armorers to Scottish kings, and that's exactly what this character is in the play. He's just another servant, another good citizen of Scotland whom Mackers is abusing in his bloody tyrannical reign. I mean, let's go back to that first scene when Mackers calls for his armor and Seaton says, "'Tis not needed yet," that's not supposed to be a sinister line. It's highlighting that Mackers is losing his mind, and he's so ready for bloodshed, and he's so overconfident in his dark destiny that he's asking for his armor a long time before the battle begins. That's why he had to call Seyton 3 times. Not because he's the devil and you say his name 3 times and he appears, but because it was way too early for the armorer to be called. Seyton was probably elsewhere in the castle, busy doing something else with his time, when some poor servant scurries in like, "Seyton, you gotta get in there right now, the king is calling for you." And this is a common theme in Act 5 of the Scottish play. Mackers is a bully to all of his servants. Later in that same scene, Mackers is saying crazy things to his doctor while Seyton is putting his armor on, and suddenly Mackers just snaps at Seyton and starts yelling at him to pull his armor off, like he can't make up his mind whether he wants his armor on or off. And at the end of the scene, the doctor turns to the audience and says, "Were I from Dunsinane away and clear, profit again should hardly draw me here." In other words, you couldn't pay him to come back into the service of Mackers if he was ever fortunate enough to get away. That's how scared and uncomfortable these servants are with him, and that's the point of Seaton as a character, not any kind of Faustian satanic weirdness. And then the final nail in the coffin of this Satan theory is that back in Shakespeare's day, the devil's title was not pronounced Satan. The word originally had a short vowel sound. Satan is an ancient Hebrew term meaning adversary or accuser, and according to Shakespeare original pronunciation expert David Crystal, it wasn't until 1791 when actor, philologist, and lexicographer John Walker popularized the long vowel pronunciation, Satan, in his best-selling pronunciation dictionary. John Walker gives both pronunciations in his dictionary, both the short vowel and the long vowel pronunciation for this term, but he recommends pronouncing it Satan because he just liked it better. So I looked up John Walker's pronunciation dictionary and I found it on Google Books, and then I found the Satan entry. And here, just read it for yourself.
"This word is frequently pronounced as if written Satan, but making the first syllable long is so agreeable to analogy that it ought to be indulged wherever custom will permit, and particularly in proper names. Cato, Plato, etc. now universally have the penultimate A long and slender, and no good reason can be given why the word in question should not join this class."
And after that, according to David Crystal, Satan caught on and became the default pronunciation of this Hebrew word Satan. But that was in 1791, nearly 200 years after when the Scottish play was written. And this is contiguous with what linguists call the Great Vowel Shift, which is a period of several hundred years from the 14th to the 18th centuries when the vowel sounds of the English language shifted in pronunciation. And as it pertains to this term, the sound ah became ah, which became which became a. So Satan became Satan, which became Seton, which became Satan. And the big irony is, before the Great Vowel Shift, this clan name would have been pronounced Seyton, which sounds a lot like Satan, so these guys aren't totally wrong when they go for that long A pronunciation. But then the Great Vowel Shift happened and this became Seaton. And since Shakespeare lived in the middle of that shift, when the Scottish play was written, these two words, according to David Crystal, would have been pronounced something like Seaton and Satan. So, different. The works of Shakespeare are full of puns, but this is not one of them. And so the reason I am so interested in this is because I am part of a drunk Shakespeare company, and for our next show we will be doing the Scottish play, and it will be at Golden Road Brewery on San Fernando Road at 8:30 p.m. on November 6th. And I will be playing Seaton and the porter and the third murderer and some other servants all combined into one character, and I'll be doing it as if it's Riff Raff from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and my friends are in it too doing amazing work, and so if you're in the area and you're over 21, come by and drink with us.
It's free!
Okay, let's try it again.
We try to blow that candle and struggling.